Hey, what's going on? Luke here, and we are here to preview round 22 of the 2021 NRL season. Now, I'm going to be doing my tips and predictions like I've been doing all season. Now, this round, I think it's a bit of a sleeper of a round. Now, I think you look at all the matchups, you look at the teams, there's no particular rivalries or anything, but I think there's a lot of good games. And obviously, the whole COVID situation is throwing a spanner into the works in terms of the actual comp itself. Teams like the Bulldogs are borrowing players from sides, so it just creates an interesting dynamic into this round itself. Now, I'm just about ready to give my tips for this round, but just before we do that, I just want to give a special shout out to Drom Clothing. They sponsor this channel. They specialize in surf, skate, and streetwear. So if that's up your alley, definitely go check them out. Drom.com.au is the website. Links in the description below. So go check them out. Also, while you're at it, go ahead and give this video a like if you happen to enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here as well. Also, turn on the notification bell. It's super important in terms of you actually seeing these videos. Also, go ahead and give me a follow on social media. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke and YT for the most part. It's Mr. Luke just a Facebook, but everything else, it's Mr. Luke and YT. So now we've got all the plugs out of the way. Let's go ahead and do these tips. So the first game of the round sees the Melbourne Storm taking on the Canberra Raiders. Now I think this one is a bit of a mismatch. At the start of the season, you might have said this one would be a really juicy clash, but this is kind of what I mean when I started the video and I said there's a lot of sort of underrated, sort of sleeping on games. And I think this could be it. I think the Raiders can definitely match it with the Storm. I feel like just the Storm up against Raiders, I feel like it's always a pretty good game. And I feel like the Raiders have found a little bit of form. Obviously, Melbourne are still winning, and I think they're a little bit down on form though, but they're still winning though, and that's the main thing. And obviously, they had a big win against Manly last week, but they're not exactly, putting those 40, 50 scorelines on week after week now. They've sort of been a little bit more competitive, and I think the Raiders can really take it to them. I don't think the Raiders are going to win by any means, but I think Melbourne, they'll struggle a little bit maybe at times, but this Melbourne side, it's so good. It's a really, really good side. I honestly can't see anyone beating them. I thought last week Manly might have beat them, but if Manly couldn't beat them, Raiders definitely won't. So I don't really need to go into this game too much. We know Melbourne are great. Harry Grant's back on the bench. They've got Sofa Solomon on the bench as well. That sort of just shows you how strong the side is, the fact that those guys aren't even starting. So, look, the Raiders side, no matter who they chuck in there, I don't think they're going to be able to compete with Melbourne. However, look, I think it's going to be a great game, and I'm intrigued to see what actually happens, but for me, it's Melbourne 13+. Now, to the second game, it's the St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the Penrith Panthers, and this is kind of similar for me. Very similar to the first game that we just talked about. Melbourne, I think, were obviously a class above Canberra, and I think Penrith are a class above Dragons, maybe even a couple classes, maybe even more than a couple classes. The Dragons side, look, you look at their team, but Jack Bird at fullback, I haven't actually minded him at fullback, but the rest of the side, it's not great. You got Corey Norman, Adam Clute in the halves. I mean, Billy Burns in the second row, Jack DeBellon's there. Look, it's not a great side, let's be honest. And this Penrith side, I think they finally hit some form with Matt Burton in the halves. They've been waiting for them to sort of just explode, and they haven't really been doing that. And obviously Nathan Cleary is sort of touch and go every week by the looks of things, and they're not going to rush him back. But I think Matt Burton really showed last week how damaging he can be, and just how good of a find the Bulldogs have got with him in terms of him being in the halves. We all know he's great in the centres, but him going into the halves, he can be just as effective. Maybe not as effective as Nathan Cleary or Jerome Luai, but still a very, very good halves player. And I also think the inclusion of Abby Coruscant back into the side, I think it added a lot as well. So this Penrith side, I think they're going to find some form coming into the finals, which is exactly what they need to do. Added Nathan Cleary, and I think all of a sudden they will be a threat. I feel like they've sort of died down. The hype's died down, definitely. Even for me, I look at Melbourne, I look at Manly, and I say, look, they're probably a grand finalist. But Penrith are in the top four. Manly aren't even in the top four, and we're talking about them being grand finalists. Penrith have been the benchmark for most of the season. All of a sudden, a couple of injuries happen, and we're sort of looking at them and going, yeah, no, they probably can't win. Penrith definitely can win, and I think they'll be looking for a huge win over the Dragons. And when I say huge, not in the sense that Dragons are a big scalp or anything, but just in the sense that I think they can put a score on them. So I wouldn't be surprised if Penrith put an absolute hiding on the Dragons here. I'm going Penrith 13+. Now moving on to the second game of Friday night, it's the Brisbane Broncos taking on the Sydney Roosters. And this is one that I've sort of looked at quite a bit because I've been doing a couple of games of Rugby League Live 4, playing with both of these sides, and looking at them, I think the Roosters should win this one on paper. They definitely have the better side, but the Broncos, there's just something about the Broncos at the moment. You had Tyson Gamble in there. I think he's just really added a lot to this side, added that little bit of grubbiness into the side, that competitiveness. I think that's what they've been missing. The Broncos, they have a lot of talent in their side, but they just don't have the right attitude. But you add in a guy like Tyson Gamble who can just ruffle a few feathers and just get under the skin of the opposition and sort of rally his troops. I think it does wonders for this Broncos side. Now, I'm not going to say Broncos are going to win this one, but I think it'll be a really good match, especially with the crowd being there back at Suncorp. They seem seem to play a lot better at Suncorp than they do anywhere else, and even with no crowds, I feel like they've really suffered from that. So having the crowds back at Suncorp, I think the Broncos have played pretty well. Will they get the win? I don't think so, but look, the Roosters, they are a very good side. They'll be looking to hit back after last week's loss to Penrith, and even you look at last week's loss, they weren't that far off either. So they have been playing pretty decent, and I think the Roosters will win this one, but I think this will be a very, very entertaining game. Like I said, in front of the Suncorp Stadium, you got the home crowd for the Broncos. I think they'll be rallying behind the Broncos, and look, I can easily see the Broncos actually winning this one, weirdly enough, but at the same time, I'm going to be going Roosters. I think it will be a close one though, and I think it will be 1-12. Now moving on to Super Saturday, this is a very, very juicy clash. This is the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the Gold Coast Titans. Both of these sides in some pretty good form, to be honest with you. Titans have been up and down all season, but as of late, they've sort of been more ups than downs. So I think the Titans have finally found some form. Toby Sexton in the halves, I think he's been an absolute find for them. We've sort of heard about Sexton. We heard he's pretty good, but he's been chucked in the deep end, and I think he's been really good. Adding Ash Taylor's been able to hold his own as well, and got a pretty formidable halves pairing there. And obviously the fact that Fogarty, who was their captain going into the season, I'm pretty sure, is being kept out of the side. I think it says a lot about this new halves combination. Now, obviously, we know the Titans are a great side. There is a little bit of a rivalry in terms of this game as well, with Dry Arrow moving to the Rabbitohs, coming from the Titans. It was a big, high-profile move, but look, the Rabbitohs side, they are fantastic. Talking about the other previous sides, talked about Melbourne, I've talked about Penrith, even talked about the Roosters and such, but this Rabbitohs side has definitely found some form, and they're finding form at the right time of the year. And they always seem to do it. They seem to find form at this time of the year. They sort of find a hot streak, and then they get to the prelims, and then they just die. So, look, this is typical Rabbitohs. They're coming in hot at the moment, and I think the Titans are going to pay for that. Honestly, I'm expecting the Rabbitohs to put an absolute hiding on the Titans. I think the Titans' defense, although it's been better in the last couple of weeks, it still just isn't up to scratch, and if the Rabbitohs really want to score, I think they will. Cody Walker, Adam Reynolds, Latrell Mitchell, Dane Gagai, Damien Cook, Cameron Murray, the list goes on and on of all these top quality players. They can score at will, and the Titans still got David Fafita on the bench, so I suppose they're going to be banking on the fact that they're going to be in the game when he comes on, but I think he's going to be a great inclusion coming off the bench, but like I said, they need to be in the game for that to make any sort of difference, and I'm not sure it will be. I can see the Rabbitohs coming and blowing them off the park, but hey, I could be wrong with this one. Titans are that sort of side. They could come out and beat the Rabbitohs, or they could get beat by 40 or 50. You don't really know what you're going to get with the Titans. Same can kind of be said for the Rabbitohs. I don't really know if it's going to be a close one or a hiding. In fact, we just got done watching the Tales of Tiger Town, and the game against the Tigers, like, you would expect them to come out and smash them, and it didn't happen. So you never know with the NRL, but for me, I'm going to go Rabbitohs 13+. Now moving on to the second game of Super Saturday, it's the North Queensland Cowboys taking on the West Tigers. Now this is an interesting one, not in terms of it being like a super high profile clash or anything, but Tamalolo is out for the Cowboys. You got the West Tigers. Obviously, they're the biggest example of a team being hot and cold. I just can't get a read on the Tigers, but I also can't get a read on the Cowboys as well. We've seen them match it with some really good sides. Like I think the Storm was one that they matched it with. Then they come out and get beat by the Broncos. I just really can't get a read on either of these sides. And like I said, both of them are super hot and cold. And the one thing that is consistent, in fact, it's not consistent at all, is the fact that their lineups are always different every week. There's always new people in the spine, new people in the back line, new people in the forwards. This week for the Cowboys, Jake Granville has been doing a fantastic job at fullback. You've checked him into the centres. He's never played centre in his life. At least when he was playing fullback, he had played fullback before. He played in the juniors or whatever. He played in reserve grade, and he sort of moved his way into hooker. I can't recall him ever playing centres, and he doesn't even look like a guy who would have played centres. Doesn't fit the mold for a centre anyway, so I thought that's very strange, especially when you got Valentine Holmes there. I think your better option would have been Holmes in the centres, and then Keith Granville at the back. But look, what do I know with this one? This could go either way, especially with Tamalolo out for the Cowboys. I think that's a huge loss for them, but we've seen in the past, they didn't really suffer too much when Tamalolo was out at the start of the year. But look, Tigers, Cowboys, it's hit or miss with either of them. You can pick either of them. I think I'm going to go... Who do I go? I'm going to go Tigers with this one. I think Tigers might win, but like I said, no confidence in this one. It's just, they're so hit and miss. Now we move on to the last game of Super Saturday. This one could be match of the round. It's the Manly Warringah Seagulls taking on the Parramatta Eels. Now obviously Manly won last week and the Eels didn't. And honestly, I think that's where you put the line through Para. I just can't see them coming back from that. But in terms of actually winning this week, I can actually see this being a competitive game. Obviously Manly got super close to beating the Storm, but it seems like every team who takes on the Storm, even if they get close or whether they get smashed, the next week, and this is going through history, not necessarily this year, but usually when you take on a team like the Storm, the next week you come out and you absolutely bugger. You put everything into that game and they didn't even get the job done. So coming up against the Eels are definitely capable of beating Manly. And saying that though, they looked so bad last week. The Rabbitohs absolutely demolished the Eels, and I don't know if it said more about the Rabbitohs or said more about the Eels, but yeah, the Eels, they definitely did not look good. The fact that they conceded as many points as they did, I think that's very disappointing in terms of their finals race. I honestly thought they would be a team that could get to the prelims and maybe put in a little bit of a dent into the finals, but I think this really ruled them out. I didn't really consider them properly, but that definitely ruled them out. But Manly, I'm definitely not ruling them out after last week's performance, and I can see them beating Parramatta. I can see them beating them pretty well. Tom Trbojevic, I can see him having a field day against this Eels side. We saw the Rabbitohs score a lot of points. Imagine what Tom Trbojevic can do if he gets going. So in terms of picking a winner for this one, I'm going Manly 13+. And now we're going to be moving on to Sunday afternoon football. The first game is the New Zealand Warriors taking on my Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. Now the Bulldogs, they're in disarray at the moment. They've got no players. We've seen a couple of times, a couple of teams have been able to borrow players. The Bulldogs are doing that. They've actually borrowed Ryan James and Corey Horsburgh from the Canberra Raiders. Obviously not in their main side, and they're just sort of sitting in the reserves, and there's no reserve grade, so may as well send them to another side and play. Now Ryan James actually comes into the starting lineup. Horsburgh is on the bench. Look, basically the Bulldogs, they lost both of their props. Add in the fact that Luke Thompson was already out, and there's your top 3 props from the club gone, and usually when you lose them, like, you're sort of in shambles anyways, let alone the fact that I think a couple other guys run off of Tony. I think someone else as well had either left the bubble or injured. So look, the Bulldogs definitely not travelling too well in terms of the ladder, in terms of just their actual predicament, in terms of the side they can put out. It's not been a great season for the Bulldogs. Corey Riddell was the other one. But the Warriors, they've actually been travelling pretty well. Tuivasa-Sheck is gone, but they have a pretty much ready-made replacement in Reece Walsh. He was already there before Tuivasa-Sheck was gone. In fact, they shifted him to the wing. So look, I don't think they lose too much in the sense that Tuivasa-Sheck was already on the outer. They're already preparing for life after him. They already had their replacement. He'd come mid-season. Reece Walsh has been fantastic. The Warriors side at times have been fantastic this year. Obviously, other times have been terrible, but I can't see them losing to this Bulldogs side. Maybe if the Bulldogs had all of their big guns, and I say big guns with, I don't know, very lightly there, but they're big guns. I feel like they maybe could match it with the Warriors, but I can't see it. If they couldn't win last week, I don't see them winning this week. Tigers and Warriors are kind of similar where they're up and down, but the Warriors just way more consistent and just a way better side in general. So if the Bulldogs couldn't beat the Tigers, I can't see them beating the Warriors. So for that reason, I'm going to go Warriors 13+. And now onto the last game of the round. It's Cronulla-Sutherland Sharks taking on the Newcastle Knights. Now I think for this one, it actually is a pretty tough game to pick. I think the Knights have found some form, obviously looking pretty good at the moment. And I think this might have been one of the first times that we've actually seen the spine of Ponga, Clifford, Pearce, and then Jaden Brayley. I say Clifford as well, but he hasn't been there for most of the time. But he had him like Kurt Mann or someone into the spine. And I don't even think you've seen any of them. Just Ponga, Pearce, and Brayley. I don't think they've really played with each other much. I think that's going to be huge for the Knights coming into the final. I feel like the Knights are the sort of side that if you got matched with them in the finals, I think you'd be like, oh shit. Whereas the Sharks, not so much. I feel like the Sharks, they've lost a lot of troops throughout the year. They've been winning. They've sort of been up and down. I was talking about teams up and down. Sharks are definitely one of them. They are a little bit more consistent in the sense that they sort of play at about a 6 or a 7 every week. And if your team plays worse, well, then they're going to win. But they don't really deviate from it too much. And I think that's due to their team. They don't have a lot of talent, to be honest, in their side. And the ones that they did, your Sean Johnsons, Matt Moylan's, Dugans, all of them, they're out injured anyway. However, their forward pack is fairly strong. And that's what I mean, that they don't really deviate too much because their strength is their forward pack. It's not one of the better forward packs, but it's a pretty solid forward pack. So if you can get a 6 or a 7 out of them, and you know the other team doesn't play too well, as long as they can match it in the forwards, maybe your backs can do something. But look, for me, this one I think is a pretty easy pick for me. I'm going to go in with the Newcastle Knights here. I think the Knights, you look at their side, they've got so many representative players. They're sort of under the radar because they've been injured for most of the season, but I think they're finding some form at the right time of the season, and I can see them beating the Sharks pretty well here. I'm going to be going with the Newcastle Knights 13+. Start off a bit of a run going into the finals. Anyways, those are my tips and predictions. Leave in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on my tips? Do you like them? Do you rate them? Do you hate them? Do you dislike them? Let me know. Also, while you're at it, make sure you go ahead and give this video a like if you happen to enjoy it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Use the notification bell as well. Don't rely on the sub boxes. Nobody does that. Well, at least you shouldn't anyways. Super dodgy. Use the notification bell. Also, if you want to, give me a follow on social media. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke and YT for the most part. My Facebook is Mr. Luke, but like I said, everything else, Mr. Luke and YT. Go give me a follow. Snapchat and TikTok is included in that as well. So Mr. Luke and YT it is. Also, like I said at the start of the video, shout out to Drum Clothing for sponsoring this channel, sending me a few bits of clothing, wearing the beanie at the moment. I've been seeing a heap of comments about you wearing the beanie, so you obviously are liking it. If you want to buy one as well, or if you want to check out what's on their site, drum.com.au is the website. Link is in the description below. Anyways, that's where I'm going to end this one. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more content on the channel. Obviously, I've been posting every day, been super consistent as of late. So, like I said, stay tuned for more content on the channel. I'll see you in the next one. See yous.